Beneath the Old Trees. The Wind Still Calls Their Names is a heartwarming tale about a boy named Elliot and a young wolf named Ash. Two lost souls who meet by chance in the depths of a misty forest and go on to build a bond so profound. It transcends time and even death. From their first encounter in the fog, to a life or death battle deep within the shadowed woods. From peaceful days on the porch to a tearful farewell under the moonlight, this story gently guides the reader through a quiet yet powerful journey, where trust is built in silence, and love exists without needing to be spoken. A short story of healing and humanity, it leaves behind a soft resonance like wind passing through trees, slow, tender, and impossible to forget. If anyone has ever wandered through the northern mountains of Montana in the fall, they would remember the crisp yet gentle feeling of early morning mist clinging to the grass, and the crimson maple leaves painting the narrow dirt paths as if whispering something too soft to be heard. In that place where the sky hangs so low it feels like you could reach up and touch it, where the forest still carries the scent of damp earth and pine resin, there is a small town nestled against the hillside. The town is called Maple Hollow, a name few remember on a map, yet it is where a quiet and profound story begins, like the wind slipping through the leaves. Let me begin with the boy Elliot, 12 years old, thin, quiet, with eyes that seemed to hold the whole autumn sky. He wasn't like the other children in town. He didn't shout or run or play noisy games. More often than not, he would sit alone on the large stone behind the house, staring toward the western ridge where the sun lingered before setting, clutching a worn little sketchbook. Inside were clumsy drawings, trees, fog, the sky, and creatures he only ever glimpsed in the forest. Some called him the Cloud Child because he never seemed to rush. He moved through time gently, as if floating. Elliot lived with his grandmother in an old wooden house at the forest's edge. His parents had died in a car accident when he was just 4 years old. After that, his grandmother brought him from the city to live in Maple Hollow, the place she was born, and where she once told him, "Those who don't belong to the noise should live where the wind speaks softly." She was an herbalist, with a garden full of roots and leaves that people from nearby often came to when sick, bruised, or sleepless. Even in her old age, she always rose before dawn to gather dew, dry herbs, and brew remedies. Elliot loved her the way he loved that old garden where every morning he woke to the scent of mint weaving through his dreams, and the soft clack of her scissors in the golden light filtering through wooden shutters. But what set Elliot apart was the way something inside him always reached out to the forest. Not for play or mischief like other kids, but because it felt like something was calling to him from beyond the trees. Soft as breath, persistent as wind. No one taught Elliot how to listen to the forest, but he heard it anyway. The rustle of falling leaves, the crack of distant branches, the footsteps of unknown creatures, or the solitary howl of something wild in the night. Whenever his grandmother was sound asleep, Elliot would sit by the window, eyes wide, ears straining for something beyond ordinary winds. Elliot's world was small, a warm kitchen, the herb garden, and footsteps along narrow paths behind the house. But his heart was vast, drifting far beyond, as if dreams had secretly stitched a hidden map into his soul, leading to a place no one else had ever been. Then one day, his grandmother fell ill, not gravely, but with a cough that wouldn't go away. And each cough sounded to Elliot like something cracking inside him. Quietly, he flipped through old herb books, asked the elders in town, and heard of a rare fungus that grew deep in Mistvale, *** Hollow, a forbidden valley where the trees were thick as walls, the fog so dense it hid the sun, and where people said those who entered were never seen again. No one advised him to go. Even his grandmother, through her coughs, only held his hand and shook her head gently, like a leaf falling. But Elliot couldn't bear it. He couldn't watch the only person who had ever loved him fade like a candle before the wind. That morning was colder than usual. Elliot woke before the roosters crowed, stuffed a few crumbs of bread into his pocket, pulled on his old wool sweater, and wrapped himself in the scarf his grandmother had knitted the year before. On the table, he left a small note. "I'm going out for a bit to bring back medicine for you. Don't worry, I'll listen to the wind." He didn't know he would return with more than just a healing fungus. He didn't know this journey would lead to a meeting that would stay with him for the rest of his life. A pair of golden, translucent eyes in the mist, a frail creature lying silent and wounded, waiting for death, and a friendship that would grow in stillness. But in that moment, he was just a 12-year-old boy, stepping into the forest with a heart full of love and trembling hands clutching a warm scarf. The morning sky seemed to hold its breath. The trees leaned gently toward him, and the wind began to call his name, softly, Elliot. Elliot, The encounter in the mist when human and wolf eyes met for the first time in the forest's silence mistvale was unlike any place Elliot had ever been. Each step he took sank into the soft, damp earth, thick with moss like a wet blanket. Towering trees stretched so high they blocked out the sky, their trunks rising like silent guardians. With every bush he passed, the mist curled around him, like invisible hands gently tugging at his sleeves, slowing him down, both in body and in heart. The air carried the scent of mystery, utterly still, without birdsong or the rustle of leaves. Only the sound of Elliot's breathing and the steady beat of his heart remained, as if the forest itself were listening. He walked on and on until the sun had risen high. Then, suddenly, a sound broke the silence. It wasn't loud. Just a faint whimper, hoarse and fragile. Elliot stopped. His heart pounded harder. He turned his head, scanning the trees, then followed the sound like a thin thread drawing him forward. Beneath a fallen tree covered in green moss, he saw it. A small creature curled up, its back arched in pain. One hind leg trapped under a thick branch. It was a wolf pup. Its fur was ash gray, matted with dried blood and mud, and its eyes, amber gold like polished stone, glowed brightly through the mist. They stared at Elliot, not with fear, but with the still resignation of a creature too exhausted to struggle, too worn down to resist. Elliot dropped to his knees. His hands trembled. He had never been this close to a wild animal before, let alone a wolf. But those eyes weren't wild or threatening. They were simply quiet, heartbreakingly quiet. "It's okay," Elliot whispered. He gently pulled the branch aside, inch by inch, until the wolf's leg was free. It didn't howl, it didn't growl. It just let out a soft whimper. Resting its head on the moss. Elliot tore his scarf, the one his grandmother had knitted, and used it to wrap the wound. His small hands clenched tighter every time blood seeped through. When he finished, Elliot slumped beside it. He didn't dare touch it, and he couldn't bring himself to walk away. The mist thickened as the day faded. Elliot gathered dry twigs and lit a small fire. He took out the bread from his pocket, crumbled it, and placed the pieces a few steps away, then backed off. The wolf watched, hesitated, then hobbled on one leg to eat, slowly, carefully. That night, Elliot slept beside the wolf. The two of them curled up beneath the trees, the small fire casting flickering shadows on the leaves above. In a half-waking state, Elliot heard the wind murmuring around him as if it were whispering something only the forest knew. And for the first time, Elliot felt he was no longer alone in the heart of the woods. Climax when darkness reached out. Elliot and Ash's fight for survival in the final days of autumn. Mistvale began to change. Elliot didn't sense it from the sky, which still hung heavy with its usual mist, but from something deeper within himself. The familiar trails he and Ash once wandered grew eerily quiet. The old footprints they had left behind vanished, overnight replaced by massive claw marks etched into the damp forest floor. Ash sensed it too. He growled softly as night fell, ears alert, body tense like a tightened string every time the wind shifted. Elliot didn't know what was near, only that it wasn't like anything he'd ever seen or heard about. And then, the night came. A thunderous roar tore through the silence of the forest, jolting Elliot awake. Ash was already on his feet, fur bristling, snarling toward the dense thicket near their camp. Before Elliot could react, a monstrous black shape burst forth, a massive gray bear. Old and wild-eyed, its jagged teeth bared in a roar that split the night. This wasn't just instinct. This was hunger, territory, blood. Elliot screamed and tried to run, but slipped on the thick moss beneath him. In that moment of terror, Ash lunged forward like a gray arrow, letting out a fierce snarl as he slammed into the bear's shoulder. The impact shook the clearing, sending birds scattering from their nests in panic. Though tiny in comparison, Ash didn't hesitate. He clamped onto the bear's neck, dodging deadly swipes with the reflex of a guardian born to protect. Elliot crawled backward, hands scrambling for anything until he found a thick branch. He trembled as he gripped. Ash's blood splattered onto the stones, dark as fire in the night. But Ash didn't fall back. Every time the bear hurled him against the trees, he rose again, limping. Growling, no longer moved by pain, only by loyalty, cried out, "Ash, get back." But Ash didn't hear, or maybe he did and chose not to. His golden eyes burned with something more than instinct now. Elliot ran forward, striking the bear with the branch. The bear turned with a snarl, swiping its massive paw. Elliot was thrown aside, his head slamming into a stone. Stars exploded behind his eyes. In that instant, Ash attacked again, sinking his teeth into the bear's shoulder, dragging it away from Elliot. The bear roared, slamming Ash to the ground, claws tearing down his back. Ash whimpered, gasping, bleeding, but still crawled between Elliot and the monster, standing there, shaking, wounded like a silent wall between death and his friend. Elliot, barely conscious, staggered up, blood running down his face. Gripping a sharp stone in one hand, he lunged and drove it into the bear's eye. A scream of agony ripped through the forest. The beast stumbled back, blinded, and fled into the night, leaving behind only blood, pain, and silence. Elliot collapsed, crawled to Ash, now unmoving, breathing in shallow rasps. His ash-gray fur soaked in blood. "Ash, please, don't leave me." Elliot sobbed. Ash opened one eye, let out a soft whimper. His tail moved barely, and with the last bit of strength he had, he licked Elliot's hand. Elliot pulled him close, shaking. Rain began to fall like the forest itself, weeping with them. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight pierced the canopy, Elliot trudged through the woods, Ash strapped to his back, unconscious, but breathing. He didn't return to the old camp. He didn't stop. With every ounce of strength left in him, he carried Ash home to the wooden cottage, to the scent of mint, to the warmth of his grandmother's hearth. His grandmother, eyes shining with tears as she saw the bloodied, fragile boy standing at the threshold, didn't ask much. She simply gathered her herbs, lit the stove, and began tending to their wounds. For 7 days and nights, Elliot never left Ash's side. He read stories aloud, played his wooden flute, whispered things only they would understand. On the afternoon of the 8th day, Ash opened his eyes. He looked at Elliot, then stretched his head forward and licked Elliot's cheek. One more time. Elliot cried, but this time, they were tears of hope. From that day on, Ash lived with Elliot and his grandmother on the edge of the Maple Hollow woods. At first, the townsfolk were afraid, but over time, they accepted it. They said, "That wolf isn't a wolf. He's the spirit of the forest, and he's finally found his home." And Elliot every morning still rose early to sit on the porch, sketching in his old notebook. Ash sat beside him, older now, his fur grayer, but his eyes still glowing gold, watching the forest where the wind still called their names. Elliot, Ash. And if you ever pass through Maple Hollow on a misty morning and pause to listen closely to the breeze, you just might feel a story, one that needs no words, yet speaks as clearly as your own heartbeat. A story of quiet friendship, fierce courage, and an unbreakable bond between a boy and a wolf. Epilogue. Beneath the old trees, the wind still calls their names. Many years had passed since that autumn. Maple Hollow hadn't changed much. The maples still burned bright red each October. Snow still blanketed the schoolyard every January. And the Mistvale Forest still slumbered under its ever-present mist. Like an old blanket wrapped around memories. Elliot was now 18. Taller, steadier, but his eyes still held the quiet depth of the boy he once was, always listening. In those 6 years, he and Ash had never spent a day apart. Ash had grown into a majestic, powerful wolf, yet still rested his head on Elliot's lap during cold winter evenings, still walked the forest edge with him each morning, and still turned back whenever Elliot called his name into the wind. No one feared Ash anymore. Children in town grew up with the image of a boy and a wolf walking side by side like one shadow. They called Ash the Forest Keeper. And the elders would pause, smile softly, and say, maybe the forest chose them. Elliot's grandmother had grown weaker with time, but her smile never faded, especially when she saw those two souls sitting by the fire. Elliot reading, Ash resting his chin on the boy's legs, breathing peacefully. She used to say, life doesn't reside in flesh and blood, but in the way we love and are loved. One early spring afternoon, she passed away softly, like a breath slipping out through an open window. Elliot buried her in the mint garden where she used to sit and gather leaves. Telling stories, Ash stood beside him the whole time, head bowed low, as if he understood everything. After that day, Elliot didn't cry. Instead, he began to write, filling the old notebooks with their story, page by page, season by season, footprint by footprint, so that one day, someone else might hear the wind the way he once had. He left Maple Hollow on a misty morning, not to escape but to find out what else the world had to offer. Ash, of course, went with him. They crossed countless towns, bumpy roads, and dry lands. Elliot taught children how to draw, told elders stories of forests and friendship, and carried a quiet belief with him that kindness could bloom anywhere. Ash, though older with each passing season, always walked ahead, a silent guide. Whenever Elliot collapsed from exhaustion, Ash sat beside him, watching the stars. And whenever Elliot laughed, Ash would nudge his head against him, as if to say, Yes, life is worth it. One autumn, after many years of wandering, Elliot returned to Maple Hollow. The town felt smaller, but his heart had grown larger than ever. He rebuilt the old wooden house, replanted the mint garden, and opened a small school where he taught children to draw, to tell stories, and to listen to the wind. Ash, his fur silvered, his steps slower, was always nearby, still resting his head on Elliot's leg like he had in the beginning. One winter night, beneath the moon's glow, Elliot wrote the final page of the longest journal of his life. Ash lay beside him, breathing softly, then, without pain or sound, closed his eyes. Death came not as a thief, but as a quiet homecoming. Elliot didn't cry. He held Ash for a long time, then gently buried his friend beneath the pine tree in the backyard, the very place where they used to sit and stargaze for hours. He placed a stone there, etched with the words ASH, friend of the wind, keeper of my heart. The following spring, a small wildflower grew beside Ash's grave, a kind never seen before in Maple Hollow, white, tiny, fragile as a whisper. Elliot named it Wolf's Flower and told the children never to pick it. He kept living, kept writing, kept listening. Sometimes, in his dreams, he'd find himself running through Vale with Ash at his side, no longer old, only light and laughter and wind. And if one day you pass through Maple Hollow and see a quiet man sitting on his porch, a weathered notebook in his hands, don't be surprised if he asks you, have you ever heard the wind call your name? Because the wind is still there. And sometimes it whispers the name of someone as a gentle reminder that true friendship never dies. It just becomes the wind.